Hi everyone, Nicolas Bras here to introduce you to my new Soundpaint instrument, Bouncing Springs. I met this sound by chance while making another instrument a few months ago. By the way, I made a whole video about the building of this instrument. You will find it on my YouTube channel. And don't worry, this one will also come as a virtual instrument. To tune the springs, I had to cut some parts, and when the cut parts bounced on the floor, I loved it. I cutted and tuned a full set of springs and sampled them bouncing on a hard surface with a lot of different takes for maximum expressiveness. This is a very small sound that needs to be recorded very close. I had a lot of misses with the spring hitting the microphone, but I really love the result and I hope you will have some fun with this one.
You can definitely hear the triplet hi-hats in there, right? Yeah. Woo! Hey everyone, my name is Dan Shimolinski. People like to call me Shimmy, and you can too. I am a bassist, sound designer, and composer living in Los Angeles, and we are back with a super fun library today. It's a tonal percussion instrument. It comes from the custom series of Nicolas Bras, who no doubt just told you all about it, but I am thrilled to take a look at Bouncing Springs with you all today. As a sound designer, metal instruments always excite me. Anytime you deal with metal instruments, you know you're in for a fun time. Varied percussive attacks, super complex upper harmonic information, and a resonance that really can only be achieved from having the actual material sampled and played. This one in particular is simple on the surface, but I think as you'll soon see has tons of utilizations in Soundpaint. So let's hop in. We have just one single part with Bouncing Springs, but that is all you need. And I'd love to just play it straight down for you so you can get a feel for what it sounds like. And that's it. There's so many small differences in there based on how hard I was hitting or where we are on the keyboard. I love a couple things about this part. So you can definitely make out a pitch. It is a truly tonal percussion instrument. But there are so many artifacts after the fact, after the pitch, that are just super ripe for sound design, super interesting to blend with other instruments, and just make sequences and stuff out of it. This is a really dynamic instrument. I love just repeating notes and messing with velocities to see what kind of little differences I can get. And of course, playing it tonally. The harmonics are giving almost like a natural, like major third to some of those upper notes. Yeah, it's very interesting. There's definitely multiple notes happening within that harmonic sequence. But this is where things get really, really fun, because on the surface, that's fairly simple. And I gotta say, I'm biased because I made about half of these, but the programs are really where the fun starts to begin. So let's see this stuff in action. You get around 20 different programs with Bouncing Springs, and I gotta say, they are all a ton of fun, and I'm kind of tempted to just go through all of them. We'll see, maybe I'll skip a couple for time, but let's just start at the top and do 12-BIT ARP. totally hear that with like some taiko drums or big cinematic percussion underneath, kind of an action sequence vibe. Very cool. And that's just 2 parts, one tuned a fifth above the others, through a nice little EQ here, a bit of bit brush, and a Lexi reverb. Takes it into a completely different world. Speaking of different worlds, here is Ancient Touch. Yeah. Woo! I love the routing here, putting the filter post-reverb. I think there's kind of always a gut instinct to kind of do it in order and have maybe your filtering and your EQing before the reverb. But here we've got the reverb first, and then that filtered down through an EQ, through a chorus. Very cool. Kind of rounds out the pitch a little bit, maybe deindustrializes it just a touch to make it sound almost like a pipe instrument, almost like a pipe percussion instrument, but super useful. And let's move on to cans. Now this one's really neat. We have so much happening in our effects section. 2 instances of grain reverbs with different settings, a chorus into a shimmer reverb, and before all of that, you've got an EQ and a compressor. I am very interested to hear this one. So definitely delving into the more sound effecty, less tonal region of this library. That is one of the coolest looking EQs I've seen in a while. 2 instances of grain reverb, very, very interesting. I wouldn't think to do this, but it totally works. You're getting kind of this ambient, like dropping down a well kind of percussive sound, and it just totally rocks. Very neat. Here's one that I made called Charming, and basically just put a little ARP in here, just kind of a run straight up the scale to kind of give a magical, charmy kind of vibe. Not too much going on in our matrix, but enough to keep things exciting. So really picking on the attack portion of this library, and definitely gets exciting once you get the stereo motion going from our delay. Very fun. Oh, I am already on board for this one. This one is called Criptic Arp, and we've got some sample and hold or random LFOs going to our tone controls on 2 different layers. Lexi reverb, once again, going into a state variable filter, and some chorus. Do we have anything? Yeah, cool. All right, this is gonna be a fun one. I can't wait. That is dope. Very, very unique there. So, you kind of get that natural, warbly, lots of harmonic information thing just from the instrument itself, but then you throw a chorus on there. Really go to town on the modulation frequency and depth, and you have something really, really interesting and dystopian. I think we're going to stay in the dystopian world because I'm seeing that this one is called Dalek. And again, we have the random LFO to our ladder filter here now, with a resonance that can only be described as very high. And because you're using a random LFO and then that's going into a scatter delay, you're only really getting one instance, like one individual hit of the note. If we turn the delay off, that's all you're getting. So every note is going to be slightly different because of that random LFO. And it kind of gets covered up and muddled through the delay and the Lexi reverb so that when it's sustaining and you're going to that next note, there's a nice long trail. So no two notes should really be the same, which is such a cool utilization of this library. Really nails the character and the characteristics of metal. Here's one I made. This is called Data Magic. Oh yeah. After playing with this for a while, I was just like, let me just get into that like bit crush zone and get through like streaming data is what I was visualizing there. Had the resonance up high initially and then it comes down as the cutoff opens, one of my favorite tricks. Very cool. This next one's called EQish LFO, and I want you to notice that the velocity is routed to the tone control of part 1. So that's gonna kind of open it up the harder I hit. We have 3 LFOs going to 3 different bands in the EQ, which we'll take a look at here. Dancing EQs will never fail to make me smile, so excited to try this one out. That almost has like a vocal quality to it, right? Doesn't that sound like some super modulated kind of lo-fi whisper? Oh, spooky. So if you haven't figured it out by now, the joy of this library, as cool as it is on the surface, is definitely in the processing, and Soundpaint gives you some awesome tools to really mess stuff up. Tons of fun. And we're only halfway through. Oh my gosh. This is just a quick fun one that I made called Flexatone, trying to get that kind of Flexatone sound with the pitch wavering, utilizing the LFO and the LFO depth within the delay. I think it's super useful. Then I just tried loading 3 parts and doing different octaves for each, and I kind of ended up with this FM bell sounding thing. Mod wheel routed to the tone of all 3 parts, plus the cutoff of the low pass. This next one is also one of mine called Game Over, and I routed the mod wheel to a couple parameters in the bit brush and also the distortion. This should kind of get like a game over winding down kind of sounding hit. Super low octaves are very fun. But yeah, processing. This library is just ripe for trying all the effects. The more the merrier. Then I wrote a little sequence for this one. This is called Indie Sequence. And I don't know if it's like indie music or what, but You just hear all these bands that kind of utilize very metallic sounding synth sounds or actual metal samples in their kind of like super reverby indie vibes, and so I just kind of tried to mimic that here. Got a very fast LFO going to the micro pitch to just give us some vibrato, not too dramatic of an EQ going into a bucket brigade delay, and then just a touch of plate reverb. Mod wheel gives us increased feedback on the delay quite a bit, almost to the point where you're really kind of getting into too much, but I'll let you be the judge. That is my favorite delay in all of Soundpaint, no doubt. We've got a main program here, which is just a little tasteful bit of EQ, bit of chorus, and a Lexi reverb. Chorus really is the best friend of this library, and it's just adding more harmonic richness and complexity to an instrument that's already harmonically rich and complex. It's got sort of like caffeinated glockenspiel vibe to it, right? I love it. Here's a fun one called Noise Pattern, and this has an LFO on a couple fun things here. We have it on the master pan. Obviously you get per part pan, but you know, you could obviously modulate any of the stuff in this upper right-hand corner that controls the whole instrument. And it looks like the same LFO is headed to our band reject filter. Wow, very cool. 2 instances of delay going into a reverb filter. After all that stuff, let's just go for it. This is gonna be fun. Getting really high up there, yeah. That mod wheel is routed to the wet-dry control of our first delay, which looks to be ping pong delay synced to a whole note of our tempo. And I want to hear what just that specific filter is doing, just because I'm so curious. Band reject is probably my least used profile in filter variable, so always excited to see it. Very subtle, but very cool, very useful. And just a very quick refresher, this feels silly, but turning everything off and just playing the instrument by itself. That's where we're coming from, so tons and tons of effects. Go nuts on this library. You will only be rewarded. Here's one I did called Phasey 5th, and I've got a very, very fast LFO to give kind of a tremolo effect to both of my layers here, tuned 5th apart. Going into an actual phaser, stereo imager, and plate reverb. Here's what our matrix looks like, so you can kind of see for yourself what's gonna happen when I move the mod wheel. Then it's been a while since I used the reverse feature on some of my parts, so I tried it on 2 up here, and then had one part that's just straight ahead. Also bringing in a rain delay with the mod wheel, which is always fun and exciting. This one's called Rev-y 4. Yeah. Beautiful. Here's one called Space Bells. Let's try the phaser. Woo! That's cool. Wow. So a super high resonance on the ladder filter is no doubt feeding straight into that scatter, delay, and then into the shimmer reverb, which has the pitch shift down an octave. All too often we use up an octave, but this is just as useful and very ominous and spooky. Here's one called Spectral Choir, and boy, we got some LFOs going on our tone and pitch of that second part. Some fun stuff in the matrix. This will no doubt be a blast to play. And just for fun, let's turn all the effects off. So that's where we're coming from. Just to remind you, I feel silly going ahead and pulling all this stuff off, but you know, the source material is so good here that you can really just process it into this crazy instrument that sounds nothing like the original. Here's one I made called Time's Up, and it's got a little bit of rain delay stuff happening going into the compressor, and then just a little bit of EQ action on the mod wheel into a plate reverb. Sound design, baby. Very spooky. And then I called this one Trap Sequence. I don't know if that's like the actual genre I'm had in mind, but definitely could find itself into any kind of hip hop track with this sequence for sure. You can definitely hear the triplet hi-hats in there, right? But yeah, I mean, this just goes to show you that something that on the surface is kind of like a sound design tool can totally be used as a melodic element of any genre you're going for. I like it. And I think that just leaves one more program. This one is called Vivid APR, ARP, maybe. I think it's meant to be ARP, but we'll give him a pass. 2 LFOs here, one going to the amount of the other, and that LFO is going to the cutoff of the filter. Gives kind of a random, oh, interesting, very, very cool. So it gives kind of like a stuttery effect to the cutoff. I like it already. So almost making music with the resonance and the cutoff there within the filter. That is really, really cool. Tempo sync definitely helps make that nice and musical. You can get everything working together. Your ARP, anything modulating with your LFOs, very cool. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this might be the very first demo I've ever done where I've played every single note on the part and every single program that you get with the library. I know we typically make something from scratch, but I feel like these have exhausted a huge spectrum of what you can do with this library. If you're not inspired, watch this again because every one of these is just inspirational to me to load up. I talk a lot about source material and what you can do with these parts, and this is just a great example of multiple utilizations across all genres, all kinds of sound design, with a quirky, unique, and harmonically rich instrument. Stuff like this is just on the surface, useful, very, very fun to work with, and definitely is a fun thing to have in your bag of tricks. So I recommend you pick it up, and can't wait to see what you do with bouncing springs in Soundpaint. That's all I have for you. Thank you so much for tuning in. I will see you next time. This is Shimmy, signing out. Take care.